Tánaiste, on Tuesday the 12th of January yourself, the Taoiseach, Ministers Coveney, Kelly and Minister of State Harris met with representatives of the insurance industry to raise a number of issues, including the need for flood insurance to be provided in areas where the OPW have completed flood relief schemes, and also to recognise the effectiveness of demountables in those areas. Now, in a government statement following that meeting, there was a commitment that within 2 weeks, which would have been 2 days ago, there was to be a follow-up meeting with the industry. And by last Friday, the industry was to respond to the issues that were raised. Now, we learn through the media and through leaks in the last 48 hours that the insurance industry has indeed come back, but it has been largely a negative response on those two key issues. One, taking into account the effectiveness of demountables, and secondly, the need to ensure that all homeowners and businesses in areas where OPW schemes have been completed can actually get flood insurance cover. So, in effect, Tánaiste, and it gives me no pleasure to say it, but the government has been snubbed by the insurance industry. And the outcome of this means that thousands of homeowners and businesses around the country continue to be denied flood insurance, and there seems to be no strategy at government level to deal with this. Now, the insurance industry will say that a very high percentage of homeowners and businesses in areas where schemes have been completed can actually get flood cover. But there was a survey released in the last number of days by Flood Alleviation Ballinasloe Community Project under the auspices of the National Flood Forum. And they did a survey in Derrymullen, in Galway, and they found, for example, Tánaiste, that despite the fact that an OPW scheme with permanent flood defences, not demountables, permanent flood defences, was completed 5 years ago at a cost of €1.5 million, 60% of those that they surveyed in Derrymullen cannot get flood insurance. So the message that we're hearing back from the insurance companies is not matched with the reality on the ground, and the figures that they are providing to you simply cannot be validated. Now, as you know, Tánaiste, we brought forward a flood insurance bill which would compel the insurance industry to provide cover where the OPW has completed schemes to the required EU standard as set out in the 2007 directive, and that is the 1 in 100-year standard. And the bottom line is that where these schemes have been completed, they have worked. In Fermoy, in Mallow, in Clonmel, and it is not sustainable for the insurance industry to continue to deny the effectiveness of demountables, where in some towns the defences have to be of a mobile demountable nature, otherwise the town simply can't function. And you need to take account, Tánaiste, of the really serious impact that this is having. For businesses, they may not be able to get credit from their bank, because the bank will understandably seek to ensure that there is adequate flood cover. This is going to have an impact on the rate space of local authorities down the line if this issue is not dealt with. So my questions are, did the follow-up meeting, which was to have taken place by Tuesday of this week, actually take place? Can you confirm that the insurance industry did come back to the government? Will you publish whatever that response was and tell us in the House today what was the nature of that response? And how is the government now going to react to the fact that, unfortunately, the issues that were raised are not being addressed and not being dealt with? Because ultimately the people suffering here are homeowners and business owners who can't get flood cover in areas where relief schemes have been completed.
Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with much of what the Deputy has said in relation to the difficulties caused to families and businesses where they're unable to get flood insurance. And this is a discussion with the insurance industry which is ongoing, and where there is a great deal of detailed work being done, including an international comparison of what other countries are doing who are faced by the same issues. There's a lot of countries in Europe, and indeed our neighbour in the UK, who are faced with repeat episodes of flooding, and where different models of seeking to have the matter addressed through general insurances have been tried. Some, I think, have worked more effectively than others, but in all of the countries it is an issue in relation to the insurance industry. I agree that where, for instance, very significant amounts of money, of public money, have been spent on either permanent flood defences or on removable flood defences in relation to demountable flood defences, the statistics show that in a significant number of those, there are a proportion of people who continue to be denied insurance by the insurance industry. And obviously this is a priority that this should be addressed. The conversation with the insurance industry is ongoing. On Tuesday, for instance, Minister of State Harris and the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, my colleague Minister Brandon Howlin, presented to Cabinet a very detailed proposal in relation to the oversight of the development of the flood risk management programme in relation to the whole of the Shannon Basin. And that is something that's been discussed in this House and that is now going ahead and progressing. As part of that, I can assure you, Deputy, that there was a discussion again in relation to the statistical evidence which shows that, notwithstanding significant amounts of public money being spent, that in fact some people are being refused insurance even where they're permanent flood defences, and then the rate of refusal is significantly higher where the flood defences are of the demountable kind. So it is an issue that is ongoing with the insurance industry. The reason the meeting with the insurance industry did not take place as recently as last week was that the Taoiseach had commitments in relation to both the UK and in relation to attendance in Switzerland at the annual conference in relation to the economy, where the Taoiseach was involved in heavily promoting Ireland at a very large international business conference. I don't think that people would have wished him to do anything other than to go and to defend Ireland, and I anticipate that the meeting with the insurance industry, the follow-on meeting with the insurance industry, will happen quite soon.
Deputy Michael McGrath.
Thank you, Lascia and Corla. Tánaiste, please don't treat us like fools. The suggestion that the Taoiseach's commitment to attend Davos and to meet Prime Minister Cameron in London was arranged in the last 2 weeks is not credible. The fact of the matter is that a commitment was given on the 12th of this month that a follow-up meeting with the insurance industry would take place within 2 weeks. It didn't happen, and you haven't been able to tell the House that a date has been set for a further meeting between the government and the insurance industry. And in the meantime, the issues that were raised by yourself, the Taoiseach and a cadre of ministers with the insurance industry amid great fanfare when that meeting was organised have simply not been addressed. And the reality is that they have come back and they have rebuffed what the government has suggested. Now the question is, what are you going to do about it? The government has been snubbed, and Tánaiste, the reality is that this issue cannot go unaddressed. We have homeowners in communities right around this country and business owners who are living with the daily fear of being flooded again and not having flood insurance. Now, the particular issue that we're raising, as you well know, relates to areas and communities where OPW flood relief schemes have been completed to the required standard at the expense of taxpayers in line with the EU directive, and where they have proven to be effective. Now, you have unvalidated figures from the insurance industry. We have a survey from the National Flood Forum carried out in Ballinasloe. One simple local example in Derrymullen, where £1.5 million was spent on permanent flood defences, which have proven to be effective 5 years ago, and 60% of those who responded cannot get flood insurance. So there's a real issue here, Tánaiste. And it seems to me, the government brought in the insurers. You asked them nicely, what are you going to do about this problem? We're hearing a lot of motherhood and apple pie and not a whole lot of action. And it's not good enough, because people feel that the insurance industry is not stepping up to the mark and providing cover. We're not asking them to provide cover where there is a probability of properties being insured in the future. That's a much more complex issue, as you know well. And the reality is that 1.4 billion has been collected from insurance policy holders in respect of the 3% stamp duty in the last 15 years. And people are asking, what was that for? But on the issue of where schemes have been completed, what is the government going to do about it, Tánaiste? The response is not good enough. I want to know, is there going to be another meeting with the industry before the election?
Thank you.
What are you committing to doing? Will you give a commitment that you are prepared, if necessary, to introduce legislation? Because ultimately, the industry will only act if that threat is made, if they will be compelled to actually provide cover.
Thank you, Tánaiste.
Well, first of all, what the government has done is we devoted an extensive part of our government meeting on Tuesday to the issue which received priority from all of the deputies in this House, and that was a very serious situation in relation to the Shannon. And you, Deputy, and other deputies from your party and deputies from all parties raised the issue of the Shannon. So on Tuesday, we as a government gave the go-ahead for the Shannon Coordination Group, so that all of the different agencies, including obviously the people in the Ballinasloe, who have an interest in the enormous difficulties for homeowners, for businesses, for farmers in the Shannon region, that all of those different bodies, all of the stakeholders, including citizens, including businesses, would be brought together under the umbrella of the Shannon Coordination Group. Now, while discussions have gone on about the Shannon in this country, I think since well before independence actually, nonetheless, this is the first time that a Shannon Coordination Group has been actually established. And if you want to do serious work on what is a really serious issue of the provision of insurance, you need to set about doing that properly. So the Shannon Coordination Group is actually, under the chairmanship of the OPW, is going to bring all of the stakeholders, public and private, involved and affected by the Shannon, together for the first time in the history of this state in a coordination group. The second thing, and you may not have heard what I said, we have undertaken a survey of what the practice is in other European countries and in the United Kingdom in relation to insurances and the issue of the investment of significant sums of public money in flood defences. We are committed as a government to spending £430 million over the next 5 years on flood defences. Now that's a very, very good, well, sorry, it's far more than you yourselves ever put into flood defences. But if the outcome of that, is that we spend £430 million, and as a consequence, the people whose homes and businesses are protected as a consequence of that expenditure still fail to get insurance, well then we are going to have to develop a system in Ireland of providing cover to people who are affected. But if you rush into this, Deputy, what you're effectively suggesting, and I know you've said on earlier occasions you weren't happy about this, is that ordinary policy holders would immediately carry the costs of everybody who needs flood insurance. So what I'm saying to you, Deputy, is that this requires a very serious analysis of how to actually address how we deal with this. We're going to spend as a country £430 million. If the result of that is that there is no cover for people whose homes have been permanently protected and people whose homes and businesses have been protected by demountable defences, that's not acceptable.
Thank you.
And that that has to be, and I said to you that the government on Tuesday spent a considerable part of the government meeting going through the issues in detail, including the fact that at this point in time, the Red Cross, for instance, from your own county, has actually given well over £500,000 to a whole series, hundreds of businesses throughout the country were affected. And I want to salute the Red Cross, and that my own department, the Department of Social Protection, has paid out very significant sums to over 400 families affected by flooding.
Thank you,
and the Minister for Defence and the Department of Defence, in addition, has dropped fodder by airlift to farms affected in Galway. So all of this was discussed in detail at the government meeting on Tuesday.